In this video, I'm going to go over the importance of the frequency for swimming pool water testing, specifically for disinfectant and pH values. The main thing really is to ensure that the water is always safe for people to be in, and you need to test as frequently enough as to achieve that objective. Now in spa pools it's every 2 hours. The reason that it's quite frequent for spa pools is that it's a very small body of water, and the smaller the body of water, the more rapidly changes in the chemistry will occur. For larger pools, your standard swimming pools with automatic dosing, you can spread the tests out a little bit. If you haven't got automatic dosing and you're on manual dosing, it's the same again. It's every 2 hours, because again you're not going to have the same degree of control without automatic dosing. But if you've got automatic dosing, you still do need to test the water with manual tests with DPD tablets and phenyl red tablets. But getting the frequency correct might involve a little bit of trial and error. So we advise starting with tests every 3 to 4 hours, but maybe reviewing it on a regular basis to assess whether that's often enough. So for example, if you was to test at 8 a.m. and then do the next test at 12 o'clock, then follow that up with another test at 4 p.m. and then another test at 8 p.m. And let's just imagine this is a swimming pool using standard chlorine disinfectant. I'm just going to illustrate this point with chlorine tests. Say you did a test at 8 a.m. and the result you got at 8 a.m. was 2 parts per million of chlorine. Now what we're aiming for with a standard swimming pool for chlorine disinfectant is to have anywhere between 1 and 3 parts per million. So you'd be fairly happy with 2 parts per million. And then 12 o'clock you follow it up, and it's been a fairly busy morning, but it's dropped down a little bit to 1.8. Again, we're still well within the range, so that would be okay. A little bit later on in the day it might have dropped again to 1.6 parts per million, and then maybe it's been a quieter evening or something like that, and it stays level at 1.6 parts per million. These tests, they would all be fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong. We've remained inside of parameter literally all day. So this would reflect a situation where the testing frequency is often enough. It doesn't need to be any more frequent than that, because the results don't veer outside of accepted parameters. Okay, but what if, because it's maybe a smaller pool and it's busier, you do your first test at 8 a.m. and you get 2 parts per million, and then by the time 12 o'clock rolls round you're already sort of down at 0.9 parts per million. Well, okay, that's not good, because we're already outside of the parameter. What maybe it should have been is there's obviously too long here between test at 8 and test at 12. If you're getting results like that, you need to keep your eye open for things like that happening, because you don't want to be in a situation where you've already dropped outside of range. So a better idea, if you're getting that sort of situation occurring, is doing the 8 a.m. test as usual, but then closing up the gap between tests. So 4 hours is obviously not frequently enough. So what you might try and do is do another one at 11 a.m. So that way, your first test, if it was 2 parts per million, by the time 11 rolls round, maybe it had dropped to 1.2 parts per million. Well, you can do something about it at 11 a.m. rather than wait until 12 p.m. Where it dropped to 0.9 parts per million, because this situation is already too late. And if you've got bathers in the water already, and the level of chlorine has dropped down to 0.9 parts per million, that is already a dangerous level of chlorine in a standard swimming pool, assuming that you haven't got ultraviolet disinfectant, because the accepted parameter in a swimming pool for chlorine is 1 to 3 parts per million. Now, if you've dropped below that, you've potentially put bathers, swimmers in that water under dangerous conditions, because there's simply not enough disinfectant in that water at 0.9 parts per million. What you would have wanted to have done is a test earlier, so that you can at least identify that the chlorine level is dropping, and you can do something about it before it goes outside of the accepted parameters. You never really want to be in a situation where you're testing the pool water only to discover that the readings have already dropped outside of parameter, because you're behind the curve on that one. You're playing catch up. It's a bit like bolting the stable door after the horse is bolted. It's not going to serve you very well if you continue on a testing frequency that's yielding results that are already outside of range. So if that's happening, the overwhelming recommendation here is to increase the frequency of testing, so that you're aware that you're approaching the edges, or that your pool test results have started to move towards the edges of the acceptable parameters.